Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois, presented by the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Hello and welcome to Excelsior Journeys, brought to you by the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network. My name is George Sirois. Thank you very much for being here. And welcome to part two of our bonus two-parter of focusing on two different panels that were done at Archon 42 in Collinsville, Illinois this past October. As I said in part one, I was lucky enough to be chosen to moderate two different panels over at the weekend-long convention over in Collinsville. It's a great fantasy sci-fi convention. I've been there several times already, and I'm already looking forward to next year. What this particular panel discussed was the alternate paths to publishing. Too many people think that there are only two ways to get involved in getting your work out there. It's either through one of the big five that's in New York, or just throw it up on Amazon and see what happens. That is not the case. There are a lot of different methods that people consider when they decide that they are going to publish their work. So what you're going to hear when we come back from our break is not only myself, but you're also going to hear from author Brad R. Cook. You're going to hear from author Debbie Manber Kupfer, and you're going to hear from author Camille Faye. We answered questions. We talked about which path we chose, and it turns out that all of us have relatively different paths. In fact, Debbie and I basically did the reverse, like the total opposite, basically. She started out with a small press and then decided to go into self-publishing. I started out in small publishing and went with a small press for both Excelsior and Ever Upward, and then just did the self-publishing route with From Parts Unknown, since I knew that was a niche project anyway. So this was a lot of fun. We answered some questions. Like I said before, we talked about our different journeys, and so this is an ideal episode for the Excelsior Journeys podcast. So when we come back, we're going to dive right in. Looking forward to your feedback. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me, George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today. As the moderator for this panel, just want to say thank you guys for being here. I hope
Sticking
that
around at the end of Archon, nice.
Yeah, you guys have made it all the way. You guys are right at the finish line. This is awesome, and. What we're going to do, we're going to start off just by introducing ourselves and not talking about the actual path that we took. We're going to save that for after the introductions. So we're just going to focus on, who we are and what we have done in terms of our books and everything else. So my name is George Sirois. I am an author of YA sci-fi. I'm also the president emeritus of the Missouri Writers Guild. I have two YA books that are out right now, which are Excelsior and its sequel, Ever Upward. And I also have a podcast that goes up weekly called Excelsior Journeys, was just launched this past week. You can get it on Podbean and Stitcher. Brad?
Thanks all for coming. I'm Brad R. Cook. I am the author of the Iron Chronicles, which is the Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and Iron Lotus. I am also the author of the Airdranium Adventures, which is for kids. All of that is YA or middle grade steampunk. I am also the historian of St. Louis Writers Guild and past president of St. Louis Writers Guild. If you're at all interested, I got stuff on St. Louis Writers Guild too.
My name's Camille Faye, and I write paranormal romance. I'll talk a little bit about this in my path story, but this book is the first in my series called Voodoo Butterfly, and I entered it in a nationwide contest, and it placed, so that's kind of started me down my path. The sequel is Emergence. The third one is due out in April, and I'm writing the fourth one, hoping to have that done by Christmas, and then want to start the fifth one. I have also been involved in the Missouri Writers Guild and a few of its chapters because I've moved around the state of Missouri with my husband's job. So that's been cool to get to know different parts of the state. But currently we're in St. Louis, so I'm in the St. Louis Writers Guild, and I'm still a member of the Missouri Writers Guild and was a secretary for them. So definitely join your local writer group. It's a big help for networking, peace of mind, getting to get out and be among real people. It's a good thing.
Okay, I'm Debbie Manber Kupfer. I'm the author of the YA fantasy series P.A.W.S. I have 4 books out currently, and as George says, it's still Archon. So if anybody wants to buy a copy, I'm still selling them, and I have 4 left of these little buttons that I was giving away to people who bought my copies. So the first 4 people that will get one of these too. I also, apart from this, I write children's books as well. I did a children's panel this morning for little kids and read them my dragon story. And I write puzzles for both for puzzle magazines and for my website, Pause for Puzzles. So it's kind of various hats I have out there. I don't drive, so I don't get to a lot of the writer group things that people say. But what I do try to do is each November I do NaNoWriMo. And I love the local group. I don't get to go to all the writings, but I try to go to the beginning and try to go to the end, keep touch with people. And that's a really good motivation if you're writing. And that's what started me on my path to books. All my books started as nano projects, and I highly encourage it because I never finished a book before I tried NaNoWriMo. It's like something now here I am. So yeah.
I'm actually doing a double dip of NaNoWriMo this year, so I am, as someone who only finally finished it once, and that was in June, so it wasn't even like an official NaNoWriMo book.
That's camp around that.
Yeah, well, it was before that. It
Okay.
was before that, but at the same time, it was during the time when it was the Southern Cross Novel Challenge. So it was same thing as NaNoWriMo, only it's 50,000 words in June instead of in November. So. But anyway, since this is all about the alternate paths to publishing, and we all pretty much represent very different paths that you can go to. My personal one started off as self-published. I had one book that was that I called From Parts Unknown that still exists. It started off as a video game concept, and then it was a treatment for a script, and then it was many drafts of a script. And then finally I decided to turn it into a novel, and when I did, I reached out to an acquaintance who was an agent at the time, and his words were, maybe it should be self-published. Now, this was back in 2002, during a time before Amazon had, really made its mark in the publishing game. And so self-publishing was very much, confined to ex libris representatives calling you at all hours of the night and asking you to invest in their $1,000 package that they had, where you can sell your copies for $25 because they priced them at $20. So that it was not a good time, for self-publishing. But anyway, I took advantage of a deal that iUniverse was doing, where they offered all the setup and hardcover setup for just $200. So I went ahead and took that. I got my copies, and once friends and family bought their copies, then it eventually died. And I went on to self-publish a different book, which was the first iteration of Excelsior. And that wound up eventually, what I did for that one, instead of just putting out money for the setup charges, I reached out to friends, family, fellow writers, everyone on social media, and I basically just said that I'm doing an early bird package. If you purchase your copy ahead of time for just $17.95, then you're not only guaranteeing your own signed copy, but you're also going to have your name listed in the acknowledgement section in the back of the book. And suddenly, people who just wanted to have their name in a book reached out, and I wound up getting more than 100 pre-orders, and it wound up covering all of my setup costs, all of my printing costs, and all of my shipping costs for everyone that I was mailing their books out to. So for that one, it was one of those things where people say that self-publishing, you had to pay to get it published. No, I didn't. My readers did, and that's what it's really all about. Since then, in 2013, it wound up getting picked up by a small press. And when that small press went out of business, another small press was interested, and they said, "We really like this. Would you be happy with doing another round of edits on it, so that way we can kind of tighten things up, because we think it's good right now, but it can be better. And with your with your assistance and everything, we believe it can be better." So I said yes. They had their editor take a sledgehammer to it, and so I spent 2 months rewriting it, and now it's the best it can possibly be. I swear I'm not writing it again. And they the same editor took a sledgehammer to Ever Upward once that was finished. And so I spent several months rewriting this one. And so both books are as good as they can possibly be. And so it was, and then these books actually wound up leading to last month. You guys are, knowing this now, but just last month at another convention called PenCon, I wound up actually getting agents. So for future projects, now all of a sudden I have another path to that. So it started out just self-publishing, and then it went to a small press. Then it wound up going to another small press that offered a lot more, that led to agents. So that was my path. So I'm going to let these three fill in just as much space as I did on that. So go for it.
Yeah. So I guess let's see. Which path haven't I taken? No.
Exactly.
So in truth, I started back many years ago, and was not. I started off as a playwright, and decided that was a lot of fun, and that's where I wanted to put a lot of my energy. And my first 2 plays actually made it on a stage, which was shocking. And out of that, I became. There's not much to do as a playwright, especially in this town. And didn't feel like moving to New York at the moment, so I went into technical writing and wrote for corporations and fun stuff like that. But then my first, not my first novel, but Iron Horseman, which is this one right there, got actually an agent totally loved it and wanted to totally make something out of it, but she wanted me to make a ton of changes. So we spent 6 months making changes, and then she was like, "Yeah, now I'm going to pass on the book." So no worries, it happens. But out of that, and with the YA that I had, I found a publisher for it, a local publisher, and they ran with it. And that series ran its course. The first book, second book, third book, it was great. I have also been in publishing. I was an acquisitions editor and layout and cover designs for Blank Slate Press, which is a small local historical press that, if they're still around, they've been bought up by Amphora, which is a local press here in town. But yeah, so that is definitely a path. And then out of that, I've started my own self-publishing company where I publish my own books, the first of which was Steam Tree, the Aerodranium Adventures, which is a middle grade for kids, and it's illustrated and all that kind of stuff. It's great. I love it. Out of that, I've got 2 more slated for the end of this year, and then I've got at least 2 coming out from my own publishing company next year. And I'm still writing, and just queried agents yesterday with my next project. So there are a ton of paths to walk down. Those aren't even all the paths. The only thing I would throw out real quick is George brought up the self-publishing arm of what we call vanity presses. which are those places that will charge you thousands of dollars and give you a book. The only thing I can say is please stay away. As we were talking on Friday, there's a golden rule in publishing that money should flow to the author, not from the author. And the only exception goes if you are hiring people to do work for you. If you want to hire a cover author or a cover illustrator, that's awesome. If you want to hire somebody to do layouts, you want to hire somebody to do edits, you know what you're getting. Just don't hand somebody $5,000 and let them give you a book. It doesn't cost that much.
Yeah. Good words of wisdom. I love that. And actually, there's some people that are going to prison for ripping people off. The Tate publishing people.
They're in jail.
For fraud, yeah. Or they are in jail, yeah.
But the best part is their secretary restarted the business.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and now they're trying to get rid of that business.
Oh my gosh.
So good. Yeah.
Just keeps going.
The scammers are out there in force.
Yeah.
It's real. Okay, so my path to publishing was a long and arduous one. I started writing in 2009. I had this dream in New Orleans whenever I was visiting about, and some of you may have heard it, but there was a ton of butterflies floating above New Orleans, swirling above New Orleans, and then the next flash was this woman who wanted somebody to attack her because once they touched her, she would change them from evil to good. And so I just had those two little blips, and I furiously wrote that down in my journal. It was like a page and a half, put it away, and then in 2009, I left teaching to stay home with my kids, and I was teaching writing, and I was just talking with a writing teacher here. When you're teaching writing, your writing brain, it gets so depleted and you have nothing left to do your own writing. So as an effect of me deciding to stay home with my kids, I said, okay, I've always wanted to write a novel. That's on my bucket list. I'm doing it because my adult mommy brain needs some stimulation because otherwise I'm not going to make it through this period of my life. So I would just write during nap times or when the kids would go to bed, preschool, any spare little minute. Sometimes it was only 15 minutes a day, so that's a big tip that I tell people. I wrote the first draft of Voodoo Butterfly in 1 year, committing to 15 minutes a day. And I really only work Monday through Friday because I do save the weekends for the family. So a lot of times it would turn into an hour, and that would be good, and I'd be happy with that. Sometimes I was like, I hate writing. I'm never doing it again. I'm doing this 15 minutes, and then that's it. And so then I'd do my 15 minutes, and I'd quit, and that was it. And I did my 15 minutes, and I committed to it. So that was how that book got created. Then I started querying agents and editors, heard zilch back, and I'm sending them out, hearing nothing back. Googling, how do I write a strong query letter? And then spending so much time writing those query letters, then you're wasting time that you could be writing. So I was revising it, and I belong to several writers groups. There's one down in Branson, and there was an agent coming from New York City, and they were taking pitches. And so I just read during open mic, and he came up to me afterwards and said, I want to read your manuscript whenever you're done, and I wasn't finished yet. You can never query people, or I'm sorry, I wasn't done with that yet. So you can't query people until you're finished with your manuscript. But I had met this guy whenever I was halfway through, and he said, I like your work, I want you to send it whenever you're finished. So that's what I did. But as a result of pitching to that guy, I found out about the Missouri Writers Guild Conference, where you can also pitch to agents and editors. And so over the years, so this got finished in 2010, over the next few years, I was pitching to editors and agents like once or twice a year. I'd go to conferences, and I would say about 15 or 16 agents or editors, asked to read at least a few chapters, maybe the full manuscript. You're going to have a way higher likelihood of them actually reading it than doing the query process if you go meet them in person. And like I said, I was able to pitch at the Missouri Writers Guild before it was finished too. I just had to, during the pitch, say it's not finished yet, but this is the concept. So it's a much I think you have a higher success rate of actually getting your work into the hands of an agent or an editor doing that way. But traditional publishing slammed the door in my face. And so then I was like, okay, I think I can self-publish. Indies were doing much better. Self-publishing became a more viable option for people. And I really did my research, and I found people who are hugely successful. Tracy Garvis-Graves, she has a great page on her website. She actually was able to sell her movie rights for On the Island. It's a book, and it got picked up after it's self-published, and she sold like 360,000 copies. And then the traditional publishers were like, oh, by the way, we would like to buy that from you. And so, anyway.
Did she take it?
Yeah, she did take it.
Because I certainly know someone online that didn't.
Oh, okay.
There's Leah Stone, who's had the same experience, but she's still in it.
Yeah. I think she does traditionally publish now. But I went to her website because I thought she was successful at it. There's a lot of self-published authors out there, but you have to go to see who's successful and how did they do it. And so you have to make a team. So any traditional publishing house has an art department. They do book covers. They hire a few editors to work with you, from developmental edits to,
content editing.
Yeah, content editing, the very final, what's that called? Proofreading, yeah. So the proofreading the copy. So there's different people that they hire to make that the best book. And then you think you're going to go in and not hire people like that, and that you're going to have, readers that are happy. I've known so many self-publishing authors that go into it, and they're friends of mine, writing teachers or whatever. They don't hire people to do these things for them. And I just cringe every time I run across, there's another little error, there's another little typo. And it's like, it takes you out of the story. And there's an effect to you not spending the money for your team. So I was all ready to go, setting aside, from what I saw for the people that I was researching, about $2,500 for a book. That was for cover, format, the content editor, the developmental editor, formatter, all the things, and also some of your initial marketing to launch the book. So that was what I had in my head. In the meantime, St. Louis author Angie Fox, I don't know if anybody knows who she is. I heard her speak at a conference, and she writes paranormal romance, and she was a big inspiration to me. And she was published by the big publishers in New York City. And she said during her session that I entered a bunch of contests with chapters of Romance Writers of America. And those are judged by industry professionals. So she was getting her work in front of all these eyes of editors, agents in New York City. And that's how she ended up landing a publishing contract. And so I thought, okay, before I go this route and I'm going to invest all this money, let me just try that last thing. I'll just do one last thing. And so I sent it to like 4 different places. St. Louis has a Romance Writers of America chapter, Seattle, Houston, and then there was one more, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It actually didn't do great. And my first 25 pages is what you normally send. It didn't do great in St. Louis. It didn't do great in Seattle, but I got almost 100% from all 3 of the judges down in Houston. So Texans love my work, I guess. And so as a result of getting such high marks, I got advanced to the next level, and then it got read by agents, editors of publishing houses. And so that's how I did get offered a contract. And now it was with a small publisher in New York, but not New York City. And so then I kind of had to make that decision. Do I want to self-publish, or do I want to take this contract? And it's a small press, so I wasn't being offered in advance. But I also wasn't having to invest $2,500 of my own money that I was planning to do, $2,500 to $3,000. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go with my small publisher because I asked around, and there's other writers that I know in the writing community that work for her, and they love working with her. And she used to be a high school English teacher, so she's very nurturing and good at cultivating a relationship with you and give and take. The big publishing houses won't do that.
Yeah.
They'll just tell you, this is the way you're going to edit this is the way you're going to revise it, and we're not going to let you give your input. This will be your cover. And I've gotten to help like shape my covers, which I really love. I was inspired by the Twilight series, and so I like wanted something like that. And so that's how I ended up on that path. Was I said, okay, I could self-publish this, but I don't know enough about the industry yet, so I'm going to hold off, and I am open to doing that in the future. I'll finish out the series with my publisher because I love her. I'm learning a lot about the publishing industry from her, and editing and the bookmaking process. So that's kind of my journey. So.
All right. Well, back in starting my journey to P.A.W.S. Back in 2012, I think it was 2012, I went for cancer treatment, and I'm really lucky. I'm a survivor. I had my chemo. I had my thing, and my surgery. And today I'm a survivor from that many years. But going through cancer, all through my life, I've been writing. But I wrote little stories. Started novels. I did different things. But I never finished anything. And my thought was always, well, you have time to do that later. When the kids are bigger, when they're, you'll have time, you can do things. And then going through cancer decided me, well, no, maybe I don't have the time. Maybe if I really want to finish a novel, if I really want to write, I need to do it now. So in 2012, so in November of 2012, I tried NaNoWriMo. I had this vision in my head, a bit like what you were saying. I had this little image, this in my case of a young girl being given a silver cat charm by a grandmother, and I knew it was important. I knew there was a story behind it, and I wanted to write that story. So I sat down November 1st, 2012, and started writing, and wrote that whole month long. And at the end of the month, I wrote the end on the first draft of P.A.W.S. And I didn't know what to, and it was coming from me. I didn't even think publish, whatever. That wasn't the idea. The idea was I had the story inside me. I wanted to get it down. So I started after that going over it and over it and over, as you do. And then in the January following that, I thought I took a bit of courage here, because normally I didn't like sharing my writing. I've been writing stories all my life, but I very rarely shared them with anybody at all. So I took my first chapter of my P.A.W.S. to a local writers group. And I said to someone sitting in this room who was in that first meeting, you were in there, that first meeting when I read my first, my thing, and I read it aloud, and people kind of looked at me. And I thought, oh God, is it really that bad? But then, I didn't know this, but the people in the group were talking about me afterwards. And one of the people who was in that group also had just started a small press of her own, and was being encouraged by the other people in the group to maybe take my book on. But I didn't really know at this point. So I started trying to query agents. I discovered, although I could write all these words, and the book ended up with being about 65,000 words, I couldn't write a query letter. I tried to query a couple of people. It was horrible, and I got instant rejections, and I was like, this is not going to work. So one day I was chatting with the person who runs the small press about, well, what would I have to do if I sent the book to you? And she says, just send it to me. So I did. And she accepted it. And I ended up very fast. From writing the book in November, the following June, I was already published with my first book with my small press. And about a year later, I ended up publishing book 2 with them. And I was very grateful for the start, I got from them. But once I got into the author community, I met people online, I met people who self-publish, started to go and write other small short stories and be parts of anthologies and things like this. I started learning a little bit more about what it would really entail, what it entails to publish. And I wasn't 100% thrilled with the lack of control I had over small press. As Camille said, I didn't like my cover. It wasn't, but I didn't really have control over it. I wasn't 100% thrilled with the level of editing of my book, that I didn't have a choice of, things like dates or prices or things like this. So when my original contract expired 2 years later, I decided not to renew it, and decided instead to take P.A.W.S, to repackage it myself and self-publish. And then I let the second book, Archon, also do the same. Now, in the process, I got my cover designer, I got an editor, I worked with people to make it the best book I could make it. And my sales, I'm going to have to say this, when I was with a small press, I sold maybe a couple of books a month. I have to say, now I sell maybe 50 to 100 books a month. It still isn't huge, but it's much better than I did when I was with the small press. And I love the control I have over my publishing process. And I do hire out. As I hire out for covers, I hire out for editors. I don't spend, however, what Camille says, anything close. I format my own books. That I think is a skill people can learn. They can learn your own formatting. You can learn your own. The publishing process is a good thing to learn to do. If you're going to do this yourself, it is actually a good thing to know how to do this. In the same way that I think it's a good thing for people to learn how to create their own websites. Same reason. Because you don't want to be in control of someone on your outside every time you want to make a change. Learn it, because it's a skill you can learn, and then you'll be able to change it. You'll be able, if I find a mistake in my book, I can go in and change it. If somebody else as part of that process has a thing on a cart, so I really had to learn. I write picture books as well, and I've learned how to format those. I hire out to my illustrator, who's wonderful in Sri Lanka, and she gets my pictures, but I put it together, and I've learned how to do that again, because that's the thing. I also, for money, I edit other people's books. And that's been my thing. That's how do I make money to pay my own editors and cover designers, whatever? Well, I edit other people's books. I have a skill in that. And you also may have a skill that you can share and you can use to make money to help your journey. It does take a village, and part of the process is also finding good beta readers, people who can pick apart your work. I have some people I love. Currently, I've just finished writing book 5 of my series, and it's currently out with my beta readers. And it'll come back all in red with loads and loads of stuff, and I'll go through it for months, and I'll argue back and forth with people. What do you mean when you said this, and blah, blah, blah. And I change things, and I listen to people, listen to my readers. It's important. And eventually, when I've got to that side, then I'll send it to my editor. And she'll go through it all again, and I'll work through it again. And I take my time. One of the things that kind of bothers me in the indie community is how fast some of the people write and publish. Because, again, when you do it that quickly, you can have a megaton of errors. You do need all the processes. You need the proofreading. You need to take time to do it yourself. I'm an editor. But it annoys me when I get some people send me work to edit that they haven't been self-edited at all. They hasn't been through beta readers, and they expect that what I will give them, they can then go away and publish. No. You have to go through it. Editors are human too. You have to go through it. You have to proofread it yourself. You can't assume that I see everything or the editor sees everything. Really important here to make a good product, to get over the stigma, because there is some stigma, because there are some bad self-published books out there. And there's some bad indie publisher books out there. So we want that stigma to go away. And the way the stigma will go away is if people produce good quality books, good stories, well written, well edited. Okay? So there's
What to add on a little bit to what Debbie was talking about. What she did was with her path is, she had the book that was released by the small press, and then once the contract lapsed and she got control back, then she went back and did a bunch of edits and was able to get the book more to what she wanted and then get it out there. My own path wound up being kind of the reverse to that, because it started out self-published. And when I saw that this particular small press, which was the same small press that Debbie and that Debbie had worked with as well, I saw that she was looking for books. I realized that at that point that I felt like I'd kind of hit the ceiling regarding the self-published version of that book. So I thought it would be good to get it out into other people's hands and see what else, like anyone else can do with it. And when she got back to me, she basically said that it wasn't a matter of if she was going to publish this, but when. And so when I signed my deal and everything, it was in March of 2013. The book was released in November. So that gave me a good 8 months of the book being completely off the market. And it was during that period of time that I reached out to her and I said, can I make a couple of tweaks? There are a couple of little things that I missed from the first round, and I'd like to kind of, make that little change and everything. She was just like, it's going to be released as a second edition, so you can do whatever you want. So I basically went back and thought of every single idea that had come up to me like after the initial release, and I George Lucas the hell out of this. I put every little idea that I had to basically just try to work with what I had already done on the sequel. Because I realized for what I was working on the sequel that my characters were doing things that they couldn't do the first time around. So I was like, well, now they can. So this new edition, this second edition of it, had all of those extra elements to the point where I even reached out to my story editor who had worked with me on the self-published version, because we were talking about the character Excelsior's sword and how it was modeled after Excalibur. So at this point, I was just like, what if it really was Excalibur? Because we only see, we've never seen what happened with Excalibur before or after. We only know like that little period of time. And so we went ahead and added that. So now that's part of the mythology. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't make those changes during that 8-month run. So to ask Brad and Camille, were there any changes that you guys made during your time during your publishing time?
Yeah. So I am both traditionally and self-published and what they call a hybrid. I actually have no problems with. I have some issues with editors, but in terms of my publishing house, I didn't really have too many issues with them. My editor actually changed more than I wanted in my book. And this is a funny story and a horror story, I should say. I got back my edits. So you turn in your book when you sign the contract, and they edit it and they send it back to you. Now, of course, this does not happen in a quick time frame. And there's a publishing date. So there's a date that it must go to print. That date is set in stone, and everything that you do leads up to that date. So I get about a month or so before this print date, I finally get back my edits. Wow. Now, here's the fun part. My editor had gone through and made some really egregious changes, things that I did not agree with, things about like taking things away from the characters, making characters do things that they would never do in the real world, adding in, things into the story that should not have been there. And I get this, and I'm at a conference when I get this. So I'm out east at a conference, and they're basically like, we need you to turn it back in 72 hours. And I'm like, this is insane. So I actually went up to the agents and the people there, because I'm like, this book's been destroyed, and now I have 72 hours to fix it. What do I do? And their suggestion was, and this is actually great advice for everybody out there, the book is yours. Yours is the name that appears on the book. Yes, there is a publishing house on that book too, but you're the author and everything in there has to stand for you. And they're like, turn it back in the way you want it and say this is the way the book will be. So I did that. I spent 72 hours, and I literally part at the conference, part on the plane, and then part when I got home. And completely went through, it's about almost 70,000 words, and completely undid all the changes that the editor had made, with the exception of anything grammatical or if a comma had been out of place or anything like that. That editor, I can say, is no longer an editor, so I actually get to, bask in the glory of knowing that they were really bad at their job, and they're no longer doing that job, which is nice. But that's probably the biggest of the horror stories. The one thing I will say, and this is the thing about traditional versus indie publishing, beyond having a team of people who are dedicated professionals in the industry to work on your stuff, it really does fall into things like distribution and where your book being able to be submitted to certain awards, getting into certain blog tours, getting into certain review sites. All of that is made much, much easier if you are with an established house. The biggest of the book review sites, I can submit to them, and I have submitted my book to them numerous times, and they have rejected me every single time. However, my publisher submits books to them all the time, and almost every book they submit gets picked up and gets a review and all that kind of stuff. It's just the nature of the beast and the way the industry works. I will say that bookstore distribution is a huge part of that as well. There are, if you are an indie, you can totally go to places where your book will be, can get into a Barnes & Noble because it's in their catalogs and all that kind of stuff. That is not the way most people go. So a lot of independent books, they have to work through consignments and stuff like that. I do not. With my own publishing company, I am just as if I were in public. I literally just created the same thing that my publishing house had. I just publish myself for now, and at some point I'll create another company and probably publish other people, but that takes money, and I don't have a ton of that right now. So gotta wait. I gotta make money off the books before I can start publishing other people. But because of that, my publishing company is essentially just like any other publishing company out there. I have distributors, I have people who work for me, I do all that kind of fun stuff. So if you're going to do that, there's a whole way of doing it, but as I said earlier, just please try not to avoid the guys on TV. Don't go with any publisher you see on TV.
Yeah. Camille?
Do you want to wait for questions, or do you want to take them as we're going?
We can. Well, once you go, then we can take questions.
Okay, and Debbie. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as far as me having to make changes to my manuscript, if you're trying to go the traditional publishing route, listen to what agents and editors tell you. If you're lucky enough to have them request your manuscript and they'll read it, the first time it got rejected, the guy said, you need to work on character development. And my main character, Sophie, was a witch with a bee. And I wanted to do it that way because she's got walls up, emotional walls up, and she just has this past that made her that way. And so I really like the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books. Mm-hmm. And I was trying for that. Well, I'm not there yet as far as skill level whenever I'm releasing my first book. So I worked with a critique group. I can't say enough about if you're just starting your journey, and I've used the word journey twice, and I literally have never used the word journey to talk about myself.
It just so happens that we're recording for the podcast called Excelsior Journeys, so the fact I must have... Here, have a sticker.
It's all coming together, all right. Listen to what they say. Critique group helped me. They would say, I'm just not liking Sophie here. She's such a, what? And I'm like, okay, I'll soften her up. And so now she comes across more as wounded, and she's got this troubled past and mommy issues. And so she can move past that and work and evolve as a character, So she does throughout the series, and she works out her mommy issues step by step. But if I didn't take that opportunity. Making changes to your manuscript, it shouldn't be scary or torturous or terrible. It will make the work better. So in critique, I worked on changes and I made the plot more exciting over 2 or 3 years, just getting feedback over that time from my critique group, because we would submit a couple chapters per month. It's like a 30 chapter book, so that takes some time, And then that's whenever I started submitting around that time, submitting to the national contests. And then they loved it in Houston, and that's how I found my publisher. So whenever I got the first round of edits from her, I did not have that horror story. I feel so bad for you that you had to go through that. But she's just a lovely editor. She's actually the owner of the company too, and she's just been so great to work with. There were things that she wanted me to alter slightly, and I'd go, but da-da-da-da, and explain why, my motivation for doing it, and then we would work it out together. Sometimes what I wanted to do would stay, and sometimes it didn't stay. So that was fine. I didn't originally intend it to be for the romance industry, but that's a powerful industry. It sells more books than every other genre combined. And so she asked, I did have a romance thread, and she asked me to amp that up. And I said, sure, I will do that because I want access to these romance readers. And so that was a big change that I made. She also started talking to me about external and internal conflict. And my character had a lot of internal conflict dealing with all of her mommy issues and other things and big changes in her life. So she unexpectedly inherits a New Orleans voodoo shop. That's a lot to process for a person. She doesn't know anything about voodoo. She also finds out she has a magical power. So I had lots of inner conflict going on, but I didn't have like powerful villain forces externally trying to harm her. And so I had one thread, and I just amped that up, and it made the book better that my editor wanted me to change that. So I added a couple scenes and amped up danger whenever she was with the villain. And I actually developed one other villain too. So that ended up being cool. But then the second round of edits tends to be, I'm a pretty clean writer because I have the teaching writing background. But like you said, there's always little typos or errors or something. And so the second round is more just, she would tell me, I use the word look a lot. And she goes, search and find, look.
Me too, that's
I
my
know. And so it's
Mine's
like,
a rut.
you really, that's
Yeah.
a stronger one. But look is kind of
I go to it too
bland.
often.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So she said, you need to change that. And there was a couple others. And then just little things like she wouldn't like using this word or that word. And so that's more sentence level and word level stuff. So smaller things. And then she would send it one more time just to make sure there's no typos. And so she's checking it and I'm checking it. So it gets checked like 6 times by the time it gets formatted. And then you read it one more time. And that's your ARC, your advanced review copy, and it's in PDF format. It's harder for her to have to change it, so she doesn't want to do edits. But if there is like a big typo or any typos that are going to bring your reader out of their story, out of your story, then you still have to take care of it. But by then there should be very, very few or none that, you can find. So.
Yeah, pick up any book and you can play where's the audio?
I know,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're the Ears games.
Yeah,
So-
sure.
So we have a few minutes, so we're going to open it up to questions. Yes.
Question I have, you were talking about you were review or editing other people's work, and then you were
Debbie was.
I'm the editor. I'm the editor.
I didn't, but Debbie does. Yeah.
I'm
No, I was actually where you paid people to edit your work, and then at the same time you were editing your own book as well. Do you pay people to edit your book because you need to step away from it and be more detached from it?
You pay people to edit your books because you cannot see your own mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm an editor.
Yeah.
I'm an editor, and I'm a writer, but I pay an editor. And oftentimes, I will get clients who don't get that. they'll say to me, but what, you're an editor, you hire an editor? Yes, I hire an editor. It's important because you do not see your own mistakes. You do not see your errors. One thing I do, you're talking about PDF? No. When I get to the stage where I've formatted my book and it's been through my editor and everything, I go buy a paperback proof of it. And I go through it on paper. And you will know that I pick up a book like this, it will be covered in Post-it notes, even after it's been through the beta readers, the editors, me, multiple times, and everybody, yet there are still errors. Errors get in there, and it gets published. And then your good friends who are your first readers still find some more things. One of my early readers of one of my books commented that some of my people were mulling around instead of milling, like philosophers, obviously. And that had been through editors, me, everybody else. So, and that's one of the reasons I really like being self-published, because they don't do that anymore in the books. Because even after the publication, I was able to go back and fix that and a few of the other small typos that came in afterwards, which was one of my main beefs with my small press, is that they wouldn't make changes. They would say they're too small. We'd find errors and they would say, but there's only 10 of them.
Well, there's a money cost.
Yeah,
to that.
there's a money cost involved. Yeah.
Once the book's printed, there's a cost to re-upload the book.
And you really want to make sure that those problems are are definitely taken care of, because it's a lot less expensive to invest in those costs beforehand than it is to buy a bunch of plane tickets so you can look around over the shoulder of the person who's reading your book and say, what I meant to say was this. Yes, you had your hand up before?
So when you say that you are self-published, are you predominantly using Amazon and the online? So are you both Amazon?
I use what's now KDP is everything now. They're just basically phasing out CreateSpace. So these books were all published with the CreateSpace, but CreateSpace doesn't, as of now, is not going to exist in the future. So it's all going to be KDP publishing, both for ebooks and for paperbacks. I don't buy my own ISBNs. I use their free. I try and do as much as possible without adding extra cost. I don't have a huge need to see my books in bookstores. They are in some of the local bookstores. I'm in the Book House. I'm in one of the Barnes & Nobles around here and stuff. That's nice. But most of my sales are online, and most of my sales are ebooks. So it's like I will sell, a few paperbacks a month, and a lot of paperbacks when I come to an event like this. But otherwise, not that many. Mostly it's ebook sales. And so that's as an indie where most people's focus are. And there's, the indie charts, the people up there, and the people up there on the Amazon charts, a lot of them are indies that you wouldn't see in a bookstore. Some of the biggest writers, like Bella Forrest or something, you won't find her in a bookstore. But she's up there and she's making millions, okay? So it doesn't, there are different words. It depends how much you care about that. I mean, when my picture books and my little kid books, those I want to go into schools and I want to put them in the bookstores. But this, no, not really. Don't really need that so much.
Brad?
Yeah, so I, as I said before, I have my own publishing company, and out of that, what comes out of that, some of it goes into Amazon's KDP. If I'm doing like a short story that it's just going to be in ebook form. But I actually have a distributor, so I use Ingram Spark, which is one of the biggest, kind of distributors out there, which does mean that I have an upfront cost. Like I have to, when I submit the books to them to be printed and stuff, there is a setup fee for that. But on the other side, I'm in the catalog, which the catalog is this giant mythical book that gets handed out to all the Barnes and Nobles and all the libraries and all of that kind of stuff. My book is fully orderable. It is returnable, so if a bookstore buys it, nobody buys it, they can return it to me. They get a discount. Bookstores get a discount, so they get their standard 40 to 50% off the cover price that they can buy it at. All of that has allowed me to be in a wide variety of places around the country. I've done book signings and stuff like that. My books are in bookstores, mostly locally, but there are some there. If enough people have asked for me outside of St. Louis, that there actually is a bookstore in DC that carries it and that kind of stuff. So there are different paths you can take, and it's just about like I actually have I have a block of ISBNs which are the numbers you see on the backs of books. Those are dedicated to my publishing company, and I've got a series of books that'll be coming out with them and stuff like that. So there are different paths you can take. Like I said before, I am mirroring the traditional publishing as much as I can in my own indie publishing.
Yes.
I know that we don't have very much time left at all, and I'm going to throw you a big question here. What are your thoughts on the best practices for publicizing books?
It's almost like a different panel, marketing.
Yeah, it's all about marketing. Yeah,
yeah, marketing.
Online is your friend, and Facebook is no longer your friend. Online is your friend, but Facebook is no longer because Facebook used to be a wonderful place for small ads, but thanks to the election, that has basically just evaporated to the point where you have to pay a lot more money, and I haven't seen the return on that yet. So. Facebook ads are not. I'm actively telling people not to go after Facebook ads until they figure out what they're doing.
I will chip in. My publisher will try to get me. I don't know what they're called, but they're like online email lists.
Yep.
My publisher got me on BookBub, which is the best one.
Yep.
And I sold a ton of books, which was awesome.
That would be the one I was talking about earlier, where a publisher can get in there really easily, but as an individual author, it's really hard.
I keep trying.
My highest royalty check came because of that. And there's other ones, but that's a great one. Also, build your email list and cultivate that. That's your relationships. It's direct. There's no intermediary. There's no Facebook that's going to charge you XYZ. There's nothing blocking you between you and your readers. So you definitely want to cultivate that, and don't abuse the readers by some newsletters, it seems like every
spam.
Single day. Just give me a break.
Spam.
Just once in a while, please. Yeah.
Once a month is really kind of ideal because that way you can get some really good meaty content, and you're not you're not just filling it up just to fill it up.
Though I will tell you, the best way you can probably do is to engage your community, the reading community, and i.e., so you're a sci-fi fan, you're at Archon, you're doing that, you're engaging with people here. I'm a steampunk guy, so I'm involved in the local steampunk guilds and all that kind of fun stuff. And doing that, I'm now directly around my readers and the people who read my books more often. So I would recommend that kind of stuff. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What are the benefits of joining a writing guild?
Okay. So it's a good question. If you were here on Friday, we did a great talk on all the various ones. So there's like 1 million in St. Louis, and there's a giant alphabet soup of them all. But basically, essentially this. If you are writing a mystery novel, there is a mystery group out there you can join. If you are writing a sci-fi novel, there are sci-fi groups that you can be a part of. And more importantly, if you're part of a writer's organization, you're around other writers. This industry is constantly changing, and it's so big and so vast that you can't learn everything you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way you're going to learn what you don't know is from other people who've experienced the same problems and stuff that you're going through, and you'll meet those people at a writer's conference. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a writer's group. It can be an online critique group. It can be an online meetup group. It can just be an online, passing back and forth kind of thing. Yeah. It can be like St. Louis Writers Guild or any of the other. St. Louis Writers Guild is open to all writers. Missouri Writers Guild is only open to professional authors. People have already been published and stuff like that. But so there's many reasons, but to be honest, it's about getting out of your solitary sense, and then also engaging with everyone who's around you, who's going through the same thing you are.
I really stressed, pretty much, everything that Brad was talking about now, just during my term as president of the Missouri Writers Guild, because writing is really just the loneliest job in the world, because you can shake hands with as many people, you can hand off your different books to readers and everything, but at the very end of the day, when all is said and done, it all comes down to you sitting in front of a keyboard or in front of a notepad alone. getting out whatever it is in your head. And what we try to do with the Missouri Writers Guild is we try to make that process, like we try to make the everything else around it as positive as possible. We try to make sure that you know that even when you are alone, you are not alone.